The applause began, and Harold's hands started trembling. For 30 years, no one had noticed or questioned the skill he possessed. This perfect grouping brought praise, but it also realized Harold's greatest fear: drawing attention. Because attention meant questions, and questions would bring back the past he was trying to forget. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe real heroes often live in silence, hit that subscribe button. Because Harold's story will remind us of the truths we try to forget. But first, you need to understand why making a perfect shot could be Harold Mitchell's worst nightmare. Pine Valley Shooting Range was established on the outskirts of town in an old factory building. The interior had 12 lanes, each 30 meters long under fluorescent lights. Weekends were usually crowded. College students, middle-aged hobby shooters, sometimes security personnel came for training. Harold Mitchell came every Saturday morning at 8, always with the same routine. He would quietly sign the paper at the entrance with just H. Mitchell, add the date, take his ear protection and safety glasses without any conversation. He usually chose lane 12, the last one, somewhat isolated from the others. Harold was 68, but looked more tired than his age suggested. His gray hair was always cut short, his face always clean-shaven. He wore the same faded baseball cap, no logo, faded blue, the same brown leather jacket, the same narrow-leg jeans. He didn't like talking, avoided eye contact, quietly did his business, and left. That Saturday morning was no different. When Harold arrived, the shooting range was a bit more crowded than usual. There was a group of students from the local university, Jake Stevens and his friends. They were in the ROTC program and taking shooting training. They were loud, fun, competing with each other. "Hey, Grandpa, be careful not to hurt yourself," one of them joked as Harold walked toward lane 12. Harold ignored it, as he always did. He opened his bag, took out his .45 caliber pistol, old but well-maintained, not shiny but perfectly functional. Along with it, one box of ammunition, 30 bullets, always the same amount. Jake Stevens was watching Harold. He was a third-year engineering student and good at ROTC, but still trying to improve his shooting. He had noticed the precision in the old man's movements, how he held the gun, his stance, his breathing pattern. "This old guy looks serious," he whispered to one of his friends. Harold placed his target, standard paper target, 10-meter distance. Amateur distance, at least it appeared so. For another shooter, it would be an easy, routine distance. But for Harold, it carried different meaning. First shot, dead center, second shot, center again, third, fourth, fifth. Every bullet was going to the same place. Jake stood up. "Damn," he muttered to himself. The other students were starting to notice too. By the 15th bullet, conversations had diminished. By the 20th bullet, silence had fallen. The hole in Harold's target wasn't much bigger than what a single bullet would make. "Impossible," said one of Jake's friends. Harold heard these whispers but tried to ignore them. His hands started trembling, not while shooting, but during breaks. This attention was exactly what he didn't want. What he'd been running from for 30 years, 25th bullet, still the same hole. "Look at this," Jake said suddenly. "Look at this guy's stance. This isn't amateur." These words reached Harold's ears. Despite his ear protection, he heard. And at that moment, memories he'd suppressed for years began to resurface. Vietnam 30 years ago, Chalk Base, 7th Sniper Battalion, long-range reconnaissance missions. Targets were human then, in situations where he knew every shot would cost lives. Last bullet. Harold pulled the trigger, but his hand had trembled, very slightly, barely noticeable. But Harold noticed. The bullet had shifted just a few millimeters from the others. 30 bullets were finished. Harold lowered his gun and pressed the button to retrieve his target. The paper was coming slowly, and everyone was waiting. Jake Stevens got up and walked toward Harold's lane. The others followed. Harold wanted to escape, but was waiting for his target. When the paper arrived, everyone saw. A quarter-sized single hole. 30 bullets, almost one hole. "God," said Jake, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." When the applause began, Harold's world collapsed, hands clapping, praise pouring, everyone looking at him, exactly what he feared. Sir, Jake said, approaching, that was incredible. How did you learn to shoot like that? Harold's mouth went dry. No one had asked such a question in 30 years. Practice, he said briefly, starting to fold his target. Which unit did you serve in? Jake continued. Harold froze. How did this kid know? What? Your stance, breath control, trigger discipline? These aren't things you learn as a civilian. Military training. Harold continued putting his equipment in his bag. It was a long time ago. Vietnam? This word hit Harold. Yes, he said unwillingly. Jake's eyes lit up. Were you a sniper? Very old stories, Harold said, standing up. Left in the past. But Jake wasn't giving up. Sir, I'm in ROTC. I want to learn to shoot like this. Would you teach me? Harold shook his head. No, son. That chapter is closed. But the other students approached too. Please, said one of them. We've never seen anything like this. Would you tell us war stories? Asked another. Harold's face tensed. There are no war stories, he said in a harsh tone. Only memories trying to be forgotten. The atmosphere suddenly changed. The students noticed Harold's discomfort. Jake stepped back. I'm sorry, sir, Jake said. That was very impressive. I wanted to show my respect. Harold stopped. There was sincerity in this kid, in the others too. But Harold couldn't talk. He hadn't been able to talk for 30 years. Thank you, Harold said quietly. But the past should stay in the past. He took his bag and walked toward the door. Praise-filled voices followed him, but Harold tried not to hear. In the parking lot, Harold stopped. His hands were still trembling, this time not because of shooting, but because of memories. That perfect grouping had reminded him of old days, different time, different place, but same precision, same composure, and same results. Harold got in his car but didn't start the engine. He closed his eyes, and unwanted memories returned. 1972, Southern Vietnam. Harold was 24 and serving in Marine 7th Sniper Battalion. Team leader Tom Bradley, spotter Rick Chen. They worked in operations as a trio. Harold was known by the nickname Ghost then, because he could shoot without being seen. From 1,000 meters, single shot, never missing. 87 confirmed kills. This number ruined Harold's nights, because each one was someone's son, father, brother. Each was a face that appeared in Harold's scope. Each was a memory living in the depths of his conscience. Tom Bradley had been caught in a booby trap a month ago. Rick Chen had died in a mortar attack 3 weeks ago. Harold was left alone, by himself, with numbers and memories. That's why he came to the shooting range, to feel control, but never drawing attention, never leading to questions. Everything had changed today. Harold started his engine and drove home. He lived alone in his small house. His wife Linda had died of cancer 15 years ago. They never had children. Harold only had memories and silence. That evening, Harold tried to watch television but couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about Jake's question. Would you tell us war stories? Harold didn't have stories. He only had facts. Painful, naked facts. As a Vietnam veteran, Harold had received many support group invitations over the years. He hadn't gone to any. He wasn't ready to talk. Maybe he never would be. But the respect in Jake's eyes, this was different. His curiosity, wanting to learn. Maybe Harold could teach something from his skills, not his mistakes. A week passed. Harold didn't come to the shooting range again. Jake waited every day, wondering if he would come. The other students continued talking about Harold's perfect shooting. This guy must be a real legend, said one of his friends. This level of shooting isn't taught in university. Jake decided to do research on the internet. H. Mitchell, Vietnam sniper. He saw names on a few forum sites, but no pictures or details. Secret operations, classified information. But on a veteran blog, he found these lines. There was a sniper known as Ghost. I don't know if his real name was Mitchell, but he was a legend. He never missed. Jake's heart started racing. The second week, Harold didn't come again. Jake wondered. Had he offended the old man? Had he insisted too much? The third week, Jake went to Pine Valley shooting range, but had stopped waiting for Harold. He focused on his own training, trying to correct his stance, apply what he had seen from Harold. Just then, a voice came from behind. "Bring your elbows a little closer." Jake turned. Harold was there. Same hat, same jacket, but a different expression on his face, as if he had made a decision. "Sir," Jake said in surprise. "Your stance is wrong," Harold said, approaching. "If you want to be a good shooter, you need to learn the fundamentals." Jake lowered his gun. "Would you teach me?" Harold hesitated. This wasn't easy, but there was genuine desire to learn in this kid. And maybe Harold's knowledge could be passed to the next generation instead of disappearing. "One condition," Harold said. "No questions. We don't talk about the past. I only teach technique." "Ah, agreed," Jake said quickly. Harold came to Jake's side. "Now, let's set up your stance again." For the next 2 hours, Harold taught Jake shooting techniques, breath control, trigger control, aiming, stance discipline. Every detail, every movement carefully explained. Jake was amazed by Harold's teaching ability. Patient, methodical, effective. Every correction improved Jake's shooting. "Now try," Harold said. Jake made 5 shots. All were within the 10 ring, much better than previous weeks. "Perfect," Harold said. "You're open to learning." "Thank you, sir. This is great." Harold nodded. "Come again next week. I can teach more." When Jake saw Harold was about to leave, he wanted to ask a question, but remembered his promise. No questions, but Harold stopped. He looked at Jake. "Kid," he said quietly, "why do you want to learn to shoot?" "I want to join the army someday, sir. I want to serve my country." Harold's expression changed. It was a familiar look, the idealism he himself had once possessed. "A noble purpose," Harold said. "But remember, learning to shoot is easy. But what you'll experience when you have to shoot, it's impossible to prepare for that." Jake couldn't understand the depth of these words at that moment, but he noticed the weight in Harold's eyes. "Sir," Jake said hesitantly, "being in war, is it very difficult?" Harold remained silent for a long time. "Jake," he finally said, "some questions seek answers even when you don't want to answer them. War changes a person, and sometimes this change becomes irreversible. Do you regret it? Serving?" "For serving, no, for what I had to do, every day." This honest moment affected Jake. Harold's defenses had dropped. "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" Harold was surprised. No one had asked him such a thing in 30 years. "No, son, but thank you." As Harold turned to leave, Jake said one last thing. "Sir, to me, you're a hero." Harold stopped but didn't turn. "Heroes," he said quietly, "aren't the men who don't die, Jake. Heroes are the men who die saving their friends. I'm just a survivor." And Harold left. But this time it was different. For the first time in 30 years, Harold had shared his war experience with someone. A small step, but an important step. Jake would wait next week, and Harold would come. Because teaching had reminded Harold of something he had forgotten. Purpose. Teaching shooting wasn't just technique, it was teaching responsibility, teaching discipline, and maybe Harold's own experiences could help the next generation prepare better. That night, Harold looked at photos of Tom Bradley and Rick Chen in his house. "Boys," he murmured, "maybe your story has a purpose. Maybe I have things to teach others." For the first time in 30 years, Harold Mitchell was beginning to make peace with his past. The perfect grouping had reminded him of his fear, but Jake's respect had shown him something different, the value of experience. Weeks later, Jake continued to improve. As Harold patiently taught, a bond formed between them, teacher and student, veteran and future generation. And Harold realized that what he had been running from for 30 years, attention, questions, memories, actually weren't things to run from. They were things to share, teach, make meaningful. Jake's other friends also started coming. Harold formed a small group. He taught technique, but also taught responsibility. Shooting wasn't just skill. It was a moral burden. Every shot, Harold would say, is a decision, and decisions have consequences. Never forget this. So Harold Mitchell found a new role at Pine Valley Shooting Range. He was no longer just the old man who came quietly to shoot. He had become someone who shared his experience, who found meaning in his past. That perfect grouping had realized Harold's greatest fear, drawing attention. But it had also created his greatest opportunity, finding purpose again. Jake now works as a shooting instructor and passes on what Harold taught him to others. He tells each of his students the same thing. Technique is important, but mental preparation is even more important. Harold still comes to Pine Valley, but not alone anymore. He has his students with him, the knowledge he shares with them, and most importantly, purpose. Sometimes our greatest fears can become our greatest opportunities. Harold's perfect shot showed him that instead of running from the past, using the value of the past could be more meaningful. Have you ever met someone like Harold? Someone hiding their skills but ready to share? Share their stories in the comments and tell us which city you're watching from. At Hidden Legends, we share stories like this every week. Hidden talents, silent heroes, and their brave choices. Subscribe and help these stories be heard. Remember, sometimes making the perfect shot isn't just hitting the target. Sometimes it's teaching the right lesson to the right person at the right time.